Yes, the day has come. First of all, I'm back. And second of all, I was graced by this boxy looking thingy over there, which came in another boxy looking thingy. Yeah. Hi guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to my channel. Yes, it's finally here, my first ever direct drive wheel, or wheelbase to be more precise, coming from no more no less than Simucube, their Pro 2 model. This review is actually long overdue, one of the main reasons being that I wanted to do a proper rundown, besides waiting this 48-inch OLED beast to come in. More on it in the future. So I've been running this direct drive puppy for around 4 to 6 months now, so let's just jump right into it and tell you my experience with it. The first thing I've noticed pulling it out is how heavy this thing was. It could probably bust a couple of floor levels if you were to drop it. The build quality is exceptional, completely metal and so clean looking that you would mistake this for something else other than a wheelbase, a sophisticated flux capacitor for the Star-Lord's ship. Kidding aside, it gave me a fresh perspective compared to other more mainstream wheels, but it's also because of the form factor which brushless motor setup provides. More on that later on. As you all probably know by now, getting a direct drive wheelbase is far away from what you would call affordable. Just the wheelbase itself will set you back around 1,500 euros for this Simucube 2 Pro model, let alone when you factor in everything else that's needed to complete the setup, from the wheel rim, pedals, and of course the fact that you need some kind of a rig, because you cannot mount it to the regular desk as it would probably break in half driving through Nordschleife's carousel.
Why do I love this so much?
Anyhow, the only way you can mount it is with a front bracket, which is somewhat of a limiting factor, but certainly not a deal breaker. Speaking of the price, just as I was wrapping up this review, Simucube has set up their own brand webshop, so you can buy directly from them and there. But there's a slight caveat, it's only meant for the EU customers, but don't worry, they already made a promise they'll implement international shipping soon, so thumbs up for this. Actually, 2 thumbs up. Because of the international shipping and because they also made a web shop. Yeah. Besides the wheelbase, in this simple and minimalistic looking product box, bringing no additional fuss to the table, you'll also get your accessories, cables, this huge power brick, emergency stop switch, and wheel installation adapters and brackets. Wait, why can't I just hook it up? Well, you can, but not until you do this thing first. As you can notice, there is no connection on the wheel shaft itself, just a hub, and this is one of the party tricks that this wheelbase has. Wireless wheel connection. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my hands onto one, literally and figuratively, which is why I in the end used Fanatec's Alcantara regular wheel rim, so my setup ended up looking as clean as possible. Most of the direct drive wheelbase are done like this, as the wheel shaft is rotated completely freely in any direction, making it technically very challenging to have one that's directly connected to the shaft, which is why you connect it separately via USB cable or wirelessly. Although it can be considered as a downside, it's understandable why it's done like this. What's cool about this particular setup is that it has the next best thing to quick release, which you just pull out and the wheel can be removed from this snug and very particular locking pattern. Speaking of the connections, besides the on-off wheel switch, on the back you'll find USB-B port, accessory and torque-off port, this peg-like power connector seen on the graphics card, which is accompanied by the 300-watt power brick. My biggest question was how you go about connecting the pedals to it. How would that actually work? Thankfully, I do have the Fanatec's CSL Elite pedals. They have a USB connection option, so you can connect them separately from the wheelbase itself, or better to say, not through it. The wheelbase itself doesn't have that option, at least not with those, so to speak, more mainstream add-ons using that just mentioned D15 accessory port, which is not a surprise since this is not an all-in-one solution, was never meant to be. Plus, as it's an enthusiast level great piece of hardware, we love to have everything under separate control in terms of choosing what we can pair it with. Speaking of pairing, I plan to do a lot of content with this wheel, starting from comparing it to other direct drive wheelbase competitors out there. You know who you are. Wink. And yes, my review of SimLab's P1X sim racing rig behind me will come out in the following weeks, while I'm also in the process of assembling another one from Track Racer. Oh yeah, and the CSL-DD wheelbase also arrived, as well as one from Moza Racing. So yeah, I have a lot on my plate, so be sure to subscribe and stick around, because I'm going to do all kinds of comparisons. Setup software-wise, it's the same as with any other. You download it, install it, check for the new firmware, and you're good to go. Besides the obvious wheelbase controls, like changing multitude of different hardware parameters for the wheel, here you can also connect the supported wireless wheel you have and control its separate functions. Getting back to the control for the wheelbase, there's plenty of options for it. Some would say even too many, especially for a newcomer. It can get a bit overwhelming. Thankfully, the community feedback here is great. The thing is, with this wheel you really need that granular level of control in order to represent the feedback from the racing game that you are playing as precise as possible. That's why we have different profile options, which go along with a lot of tweaking that needs to be done to get to that near perfect feedback. Before all, you need to figure out what kind of settings will you use both in-game and in the Simucube software, so they can coexist and give you the best possible feedback and what you think or feel is the right amount. And basically you have to do this with every game, which is why I recommend you take your time and set up your favorite games properly, because after that you're good to go for a long time. Thankfully, just as I was finishing my review, Simucube released an update for their software, which, so to speak, added a profile sharing function for the wheel setup between users, where you can just filter out your game or even car that you're driving, and load your Simucube wheel based on the already tried and true setup. Take notice that users also share their in-game wheel settings, so be sure to configure those too. It also has a ranking system, so it's much easier to see what actually works and what not. I won't go too deep into it right now in terms of the settings, especially now with this option. I'll probably make a dedicated video on it, as well as for other wheels, because this is something that a lot of you out there are always in search for. Be extremely careful when you're about to do your first lap in, because this wheelbase can catch you off guard easily with its 25 Nm of torque. This high torque mode is by default disabled, so it's not that likely that something will go wrong. Plus, the wheel cuts off automatically if it detects a sudden spike in its movements. That's also the reason why you'll get this big red and yellow emergency switch, which removes all the torque from the wheel, after which you begin to sail as smooth as a butter on a hot morning toast. It was extremely amusing pressing it while my friends were driving around. Their faces were priceless when the wheel became 0G, plus it also helps disabling the wheel from time to time when you go and grab a bite from the kitchen, because otherwise it beeps at you if you leave it inactive. Yes, I know it's jerry-rigged. Let me know in the comment section down below if there is any 3D printed options, brackets let's say, so I can mount this switch onto these aluminum profiles. Putting aside the raw power, the feedback resolution that it provides is greater than anything I've tried so far, incomparable basically, which is not a surprise since I haven't tried any direct drive wheel-based systems until now. I'm extremely eager to cross-compare it with some of the other direct drive wheel-based models, as well as some of the latest belt-driven systems, hopefully the T248 from Thrustmaster. As I mentioned earlier, you'll have to fine-tune it per game, because this wheel can get so precise with the output that it receives from the game that you'll have to have an individual approach. And you should, because if this wheelbase cannot give you that next to real-life experience, nothing else can. In practice, I would use it with anywhere from 40 to 60% of total power in most of the sim racing titles, because otherwise you'll feel like you drove a go-kart for 2 hours straight. It's a proper forearm workout. The torque. Oh god, the torque. Oh. Yeah, it's something. The feel of the road surface you'll get is extremely granular and convincing. It would be interesting to try this in a virtual environment, just to see how much it can mess up with your brain in terms of persuading you that this is the real thing. Not because of the graphics, but rather because of the feedback that complements it alongside. Again, that's if you properly set your in-game and hardware wheelbase configuration, although thankfully now we have those pre-configured and pre-tried wheelbase profiles from other users that you can just load in from the cloud. So yeah, as you've probably noticed by now, I was properly blown away by this experience, and although I was somewhat limited on the wheel side of things, the wheel rim, that is. There is still a lot of things that I want to try it with, especially comparison-wise and in terms of having a proper full-blown wheel, let's say from a GT3 model. There's a chance I might do that really soon. Simucube just recently released their first wheel ever, so be sure to stick around for that too, because I'll do everything to get my hands onto one, as well as other wheel rims that are compatible with it. That's it for this time for me. Thank you once again for watching. If this was helpful in any way, please leave me a thumbs up because that really helps a lot. And if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe. And if you already are, be sure to press that notification bell down below so you don't miss out on a new video. And until then, catch you later, fam. I don't know why, but this smells so good. Maybe. Ooh, it's too much actually. Getting an instant headache. Whew.